The dodo, the poster bird of human appetite. The dodo is the most famous extinction story ever, and it's depressingly simple. When Portuguese sailors landed on Mauritius in the 1500s, they found giant, flightless pigeons waddling around like clueless turkeys. The dodo had evolved on an island with no predators, so it wasn't afraid of humans. Big mistake. Reports say sailors could literally walk up and club them over the head. Their meat wasn't even particularly good, often described as tough and oily, but hungry sailors weren't picky. They also brought pigs, rats, and monkeys, which devoured dodo eggs. Within less than a century, the dodo was gone. The tragedy isn't just that humans ate them, it's that we did it casually, almost absent-mindedly. The dodo wasn't a threat, wasn't overpopulated, it was just there, and so we turned it into dinner. Today, the dodo is a cultural symbol of extinction. Cartoons, logos, even the phrase, "as dead as a dodo," remind us of what happens when we treat the natural world like a snack bar. The dodo story is basically the original fast food tragedy. Too easy, too convenient, and gone before we realized what we'd lost. The woolly mammoth, Ice Age steak on the hoof. When you think of the woolly mammoth, you picture shaggy Ice Age elephants marching through snow. But for early humans, mammoths weren't majestic symbols, they were food. Archaeological sites across Europe and Siberia are basically mammoth barbecue pits. Bones show butchery marks, and campsites have yielded mammoth ribs stacked like firewood. Some mammoth hunts were coordinated drives, forcing herds into traps or bogs where they could be killed more easily. The meat could feed entire tribes for months. Their fat was fuel, bones became tools, and even their hides covered shelters. In other words, mammoths were prehistoric Costco, one stop for all your survival needs. But humans didn't just hunt a few here and there. As the climate warmed and mammoth ranges shrank, we kept hunting them anyway. By about 4,000 years ago, mammoths were gone from the mainland, surviving only on tiny islands before disappearing completely. We sometimes imagine mammoths as victims of climate change, but humans were the accelerant. We hunted them faster than they could reproduce, eating them into history books. If Ice Age had been realistic, Sid, Manny, and Diego would have ended up on a spit roast. All right, I will be posting more videos here, so slam that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. This helps us to rank better in the YouTube algorithm. The passenger pigeon, the sky buffet. In the 1800s, North America's skies were darkened by passenger pigeons. Flocks were so dense they blotted out the sun for hours. There may have been up to 5 billion of them, making passenger pigeons the most abundant bird on Earth. So naturally, humans said, "Let's eat them all." Pigeons were cheap, easy protein. Hunters killed them with nets, poles, and even cannons loaded with birdshot. Trainloads of pigeons were shipped to cities as food. Restaurants served pigeon pie. Farmers complained that the birds ate their crops, so mass hunts were encouraged. The slaughter was industrial. In one Ohio hunt in 1878, 1 billion birds were killed in a single season. By the late 1800s, the population collapsed. The last wild pigeon was shot in 1901, and in 1914, the last captive pigeon, Martha, died in the Cincinnati Zoo. Passenger pigeons went from billions to zero in less than a century, all because we saw them as an endless buffet. Imagine if McDonald's ran out of chicken nuggets and shut down forever. That's basically what we did to the skies of America. The great auk, the penguin that couldn't run. The great auk was a flightless seabird that lived in the North Atlantic, looking a lot like a chunky penguin. Unfortunately, it was also delicious. Auks were easy prey. They waddled on land, nested in huge colonies, and couldn't fly. Sailors and hunters clubbed them by the thousands for meat, eggs, and oil. Bones from prehistoric sites suggest humans were hunting them for tens of thousands of years. But things got catastrophic in the 16th century when European demand skyrocketed. The last confirmed great aurochs were killed in 1844 on an Icelandic island. They weren't hunted for survival at that point. The men who killed them were trying to sell the skins to collectors. The great auk was literally beaten out of existence, one club at a time. Think of it as the penguin's unlucky cousin that got stuck in the wrong hemisphere and met humanity first. Steller's sea cow, the blubber banquet. When Russian explorers reached the Bering Sea in 1741, they discovered Steller's sea cow, a gigantic relative of the manatee that grew up to 30 feet long. They were slow, gentle, and grazed on kelp in shallow water. In other words, they were floating buffets of blubber. Hunters killed them by the dozens, harvesting their meat, fat, and hides. The meat reportedly tasted like beef mixed with fish, and their fat burned cleanly in lamps. Here's the insane part. They were discovered in 1741 and extinct by 1768. That's less than 30 years between hello and goodbye. Steller's sea cow went extinct not in prehistoric times, but in recorded history, eaten to death by sailors who found them too easy to resist. Basically, the manatee version of a Costco rotisserie chicken, big, slow, and gone way too fast. The Eurasian aurochs, the OG cattle. The aurochs was the wild ancestor of modern cattle, huge horned beasts that roamed Europe, Asia, and North Africa. Bulls stood nearly 6 feet tall at the shoulder and were notoriously aggressive. Humans hunted them for meat for thousands of years, and later domesticated smaller, tamer descendants that became modern cows. But while cows thrived, wild aurochs were hunted relentlessly. Their habitat shrank, and by 1627, the last one died in Poland. Ironically, we didn't just eat them into extinction, we replaced them with their weaker, tastier cousins. Imagine if we hunted wolves into extinction, then replaced them with chihuahuas. That's basically what happened with the aurochs. Megatherium, the giant ground sloth. You might think a sloth is harmless, but the extinct Megatherium was the size of an elephant. These ground sloths roamed South America, standing up to 20 feet tall on their hind legs, swiping with claws longer than kitchen knives. They were slow, plant-eating giants, and humans ate them. Fossil sites show butchery marks on Megatherium bones, proof early people hunted them for meat. It was probably like eating a walking warehouse of steak. The problem is, slow breeders like Megatherium couldn't keep up with human hunting pressure. Combined with climate shifts, they vanished around 10,000 years ago. Imagine Sid from Ice Age, except instead of cracking jokes, we cracked ribs at a barbecue. Pinta Island tortoise, lonesome George's lost kin. The Galapagos Islands were once full of giant tortoises, but sailors in the 1700s and 1800s discovered they made excellent portable food. Tortoises could survive for months without food or water, so crews stacked them alive in ship holds, eating them one by one. By the 20th century, most populations were gone. The most famous casualty was the Pinta Island tortoise, represented by Lonesome George, the last of his kind. Despite decades of conservation attempts, George died in 2012, officially ending his lineage. We didn't just eat tortoises, we literally used them as living canned goods. They were the original to-go meals, except the to-go meant extinction. The quagga, the half-zebra snack. The quagga was a subspecies of zebra found in South Africa, with striped fronts and plain brown backs. Settlers hunted them for meat and hides, and farmers killed them for eating crops. By the late 1800s, quaggas were gone. The last one died in Amsterdam Zoo in 1883. Unlike other extinctions, this one was almost casual. The quagga wasn't even widely recognized as distinct until after it was extinct. It looked like someone painted a zebra halfway and gave up, and humans decided that made it expendable. The Labrador duck, the forgotten dinner. The Labrador duck was a North American sea duck with strange habits. It fed mostly on shellfish and didn't migrate predictably. Hunters didn't even think it tasted that good. And yet, by the late 1800s, it was gone. Overhunting, habitat loss, and declining shellfish beds wiped them out. The last confirmed Labrador duck was shot in 1878. What's tragic is how little we cared. It wasn't hunted into extinction for survival or even for good eating. It just quietly slipped away, one plate at a time. It's the forgotten appetizer of extinction stories. Nobody really remembers ordering it, but somehow it got eaten anyway. If you've watched to this point, slam that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. This helps us to rank better in the YouTube algorithm.